A young nurse saved a disabled girl during flooding. Turns out her dad is a billionaire. He changed her life in a shocking way. It was rainy season in Pennsylvania, and the water levels were rising fast. The skies had been weeping for days, but this morning felt different. The clouds hung lower, heavier, as if something ominous was about to unfold. Local news anchors, with trembling voices, urged residents to evacuate. Flash flood warnings blinked on screens and echoed through emergency broadcasts. But the storm didn't wait for anyone. It came harder, fiercer, and far faster than anyone had anticipated. Elena, a young nurse, had already tied her hair back, laced her shoes, and was halfway into her scrubs when she heard the rising pitch of wind outside. Her apartment window rattled from the gusts of rain slamming against it. But she didn't flinch. Dedication ran through her like blood. She had a morning shift at the hospital. And nothing, not even the storm of the year, was going to keep her from her patients. With one last look at her modest apartment, she grabbed her umbrella, slung her bag across her shoulder, and stepped into the rain-soaked world. Within minutes, she realized the news hadn't exaggerated. Water was rising at a terrifying pace. Streets that had been walkable the day before were now rivers. Storm drains couldn't keep up. Cars sat abandoned, submerged halfway to their windows. Alarms blared in the distance. Elena gritted her teeth and kept moving. She drove her little hatchback as far as she could, carefully weaving through the growing puddles and fallen branches. But only a few blocks from the hospital, a sudden wave of water surged across the road like a living beast. It crashed against her car with brutal force, lifting it off the pavement and pushing it toward the curb. Panic gripped her chest. She slammed the door open and waded out, cold water slapping against face. Her car was done for. It didn't matter now. The hospital, her destination, was still visible in the distance, its tall windows glowing faintly through the storm. That was where she needed to be. She wrapped her jacket tighter and began walking, using parked cars and road signs for balance as she trudged through the rising flood. The cold bit at her skin, and debris floated past, shattered wood, street signs, garbage cans tipped sideways. Her heart pounded as she approached a safe patch of higher ground near a crumbling corner store. From there, she could catch her breath. She stood under a broken awning, water dripping from her clothes, her breathing heavy. And then she heard it. A sound, soft, almost swallowed by the rain. Crying. She turned, squinting through the downpour. And there, just across the street, was a little girl, no older than 10, sitting in a wheelchair, soaked, shivering, and utterly alone. She was clutching the arms of her chair as water lapped at its wheels. Her small frame shook with sobs, her hair plastered to her forehead. Elena didn't think. She moved. She plunged back into the water, pushing against the current with everything she had. The street had become a stream, with dangerous undercurrents tugging at her feet. But she kept her eyes locked on the girl, forcing herself forward inch by inch. "Hold on," Elena called, the wind swallowing her voice. The girl looked up, her eyes wide with fear and hope. The wheelchair tilted as another gust of water came, nearly knocking her over. Elena reached her just in time, grabbing the armrest and steadying it. Without hesitating, she bent down and scooped the girl into her arms. The child clung to her neck, sobbing into her shoulder. "It's okay. I've got you," Elena whispered, her own fear buried beneath a layer of calm she didn't know she had. She scanned the area. There was no way to go back to her apartment. The hospital was still too far, and the water was rising every second. Then she saw it, a partially flooded building nearby, a stairwell barely visible above the waterline. That was their chance. With the girl in her arms, Elena waded toward it. Every step was a battle, the weight of the child and the water threatening to pull her under. Her arms trembled, but she wouldn't let go. Not now. Not ever. They reached the building. The ground floor was already flooding, but the stairwell to the roof was dry, for now. She carried the girl up, her wet shoes slipping on the concrete steps. At the top, the rooftop was exposed to the storm, but it was high enough that the flood couldn't touch them. For now, they were safe. Elena sat down, exhausted, still holding the girl close. Her heart thundered in her chest, the weight of what just happened slowly sinking in. The girl had stopped crying. She looked up at Elena with wide, grateful eyes. "What's your name?" Elena asked gently. "Ava," the girl said, her voice small and hoarse. I was waiting for my driver. After piano class. And then the water started coming. I couldn't move fast enough. Elena's heart ached. This child had been left alone, caught in something no one could have expected. She tucked a piece of wet hair behind Ava's ear and smiled. You're safe now, Ava. We're going to be okay. They sat together as the storm raged on. The rooftop became their island in a sea of chaos. Elena shielded Ava as best she could with her body, using her jacket to keep the wind from cutting too sharply. An hour passed, then another. Eventually, the sound of choppers overhead broke through the wind. Rescue teams arrived, rappelling down, scanning rooftops. We're here, Elena shouted, waving her arms. A rope was lowered. Ava went first, lifted carefully into the arms of a paramedic. Then Elena followed, weak and cold, but relieved. They were taken to safety, wrapped in blankets, rushed into a medical van. But the real surprise came seconds later. A black SUV with tinted windows pulled up, skidding to a stop. Out stepped a tall man in a tailored coat. His eyes scanned the crowd in desperation until they landed on Ava. "Daddy," she cried, running toward him. He dropped to his knees, scooping her into his arms. He was trembling. His eyes glistened. "Oh my God. Ava. I thought I lost you." She pointed behind her. "She saved me." Elena stood quietly, uncertain. The man looked at her. Their eyes locked. "You?" he asked. Elena nodded. His expression changed: shock, recognition, gratitude, all crashing over him at once. "You're Elena Reyes. You work at Ridgeview Hospital." "Yes." He stared at her, stunned. "You didn't just save my daughter. You saved my entire world." She didn't know what to say. He stepped forward, held out his hand. "Alexander Kane." "Thank you." Elena blinked. The name sounded familiar. Too familiar. And then it clicked. Alexander Kane, the tech billionaire. The founder of Kane Systems. A man who'd made headlines not for flaunting his wealth, but for keeping an incredibly private life. She had just saved the daughter of one of the richest men in the country. The morning sun rose like nothing had happened. Birdsong pierced the silence that followed the chaos. The clouds were gone, the sky scrubbed clean as if nature had hit a reset button. But the streets still bore the memory, puddles in the craters of broken roads, debris lining sidewalks, and the stale scent of floodwater lingering in the air. The city was limping back to life, slowly, cautiously. Inside a modest apartment tucked above a corner pharmacy, Elena Reyes stood in front of her bathroom mirror, tying her hair back. She looked different. There was mud beneath her nails, a scratch across her cheek, and a haunting tiredness in her eyes. But beneath that exhaustion was something else. Resolve. She had survived the storm. She had saved a life. She tucked her ID badge into her scrubs pocket and reached for her hospital bag. It was still damp from yesterday. She hesitated, then slung it over her shoulder anyway. The hospital needed all hands on deck, and despite the flood, the fear, and the fame she hadn't asked for, Elena was a nurse first. The drive to the hospital was eerily smooth. Most of the streets had been cleared, though emergency crews were still hard at work. She passed neighborhoods she didn't recognize anymore. Homes crumbled, shops gutted, lives uprooted. But the city was breathing again. That mattered. She pulled into the hospital parking lot just before 7 a.m. A few other nurses were arriving too, their uniforms slightly wrinkled, their steps just a little slower than usual. Everyone had their own version of the storm to carry. Elena nodded to them, her smile faint but genuine. Then she noticed the murmurs. It started as a quiet buzz. Nurses huddled near the sliding doors. Orderlies on break, whispering over styrofoam cups of coffee. Security guards stiffening, speaking into radios with sudden urgency. Elena followed their gaze, confused. That's when she saw them. 3 black limousines, gleaming even under the still-drying sky, pulled into the circular driveway like a presidential motorcade. Tinted windows, chrome rims, spotless and intimidating. The kind of luxury that made you look twice, and then a third time. Doors opened. First came the security, 3 men in tailored suits with earpieces and hard stares. Then the driver stepped forward, adjusting his cap, opening the rear door with reverence. Out stepped a man, tall, confident, in a black cashmere coat, his hair neatly combed, his expression composed but unreadable. And holding his hand was Ava, the little girl Elena had carried through the flood just the day before. She looked different now, too, dressed in a crisp sky blue coat, her hair braided, her eyes full of light. She smiled the moment she saw Elena. Elena blinked. What was happening? Gasps rippled through the hospital entrance. Someone from HR dropped their clipboard. Another nurse elbowed a colleague in disbelief. That's him, right? Alexander Kane. The billionaire? Alexander Kane walked with purpose, his hand never leaving his daughter's. His gaze never wavered as he approached the hospital entrance. Straight toward Elena. Elena Reyes, he said, stopping in front of her. She nodded, stunned. Yes, he let go of Ava's hand and stepped closer. The air seemed to tighten around them. Nurses stopped walking. Patients near the windows pressed closer to the glass. I wanted to come personally, he said, his voice low but firm, to thank you. You don't have to, she began. He raised a hand, not to silence her, but gently. No, I do. He reached into his coat. What he pulled out wasn't flashy. It wasn't some oversized novelty check or dramatic suitcase. It was a slim, elegant envelope, black with a silver seal. He handed it to her. Elena took it hesitantly, the weight of it far more than paper. She opened the flap and froze. A check. $800,000. Pay to the order of Elena Reyes. Drawn directly from Kane Holdings. Her breath caught. This isn't charity, he said, watching her closely. This isn't some feel-good PR stunt. You saved my daughter. You carried her through rising waters, protected her with your own body, stayed calm when most people would have panicked. I've built my entire life around being prepared for anything. But yesterday, I wasn't. You were. She stared at the number again. It looked surreal. Like Monopoly money printed with too many zeros. You don't have to do this, she whispered. But I want to, he said. Let me change your life. You changed mine. Around them, the hospital was still. No one moved. No one spoke. Elena swallowed. Her hands trembled slightly. Her heart thundered. I don't know what to say, she murmured. Say yes, Ava said softly, stepping forward and wrapping her arms around Elena's waist. You saved me. Daddy said real heroes don't wear capes. They wear scrubs. Elena's throat tightened. She knelt, hugging Ava tightly, tears prickling at her eyes. When she looked back up, she met Alexander Kane's gaze again, and she said the only thing that felt right. Thank you. He nodded once, then turned to his team, giving a subtle gesture. The security guard stepped back. Ava returned to his side. As he turned to leave, he paused again. One more thing, he said. If you ever want to do more, if you have dreams bigger than this place, call me. He handed her a second card. It was silver. No logo. Just a name, a number, and the words, let's build something. Then, without another word, he and Ava returned to the limousines. The doors closed. The engines purred, and the motorcade slipped away, leaving the hospital quieter than before. But not Elena. She stood there for a long moment, the check still in her hand, the silver card pressed against her palm. Then her coworkers rushed forward. Is that real? Did he actually? You're a hero, Elena. A real one. She laughed softly, still overwhelmed, still processing. In the hours that followed, she worked her shift, checked on patients, administered meds, comforted an elderly woman who had lost her home to the flood. Even with the check tucked away in her locker, Elena didn't change. But something inside her had. She walked with a little more confidence, smiled a little more freely. And when she looked out the window during a short break, she didn't just see the streets of a broken city. She saw possibilities. That night, in her apartment, she spread papers across her dining table, notes she had scribbled over the years, ideas for a pediatric outreach clinic, a safe space for children with disabilities, free therapy sessions, home visits, a mobile health unit. Dreams she had always shelved because they felt impossible, but not anymore. She looked at the check again, not as an end, but a beginning. In a single day, just one, the world had shifted. Not because of fame, not because of money, but because someone had seen her, believed in her, and reminded her that compassion could echo further than she ever imagined. It had started as a day like any other, and become a day she would never forget. The sky over Pennsylvania was different now, clear, boundless, as if nature itself had pressed a reset button. The rains were gone, the rivers calm again, and the city had begun to breathe in a rhythm that no longer carried panic in its lungs. The world had turned its page. So had Elena. Weeks had passed since the flood that nearly took Ava Kane's life, and the ripple of that moment had grown into a wave, one that washed over Elena's life in ways she never expected. That morning, the sunlight streamed through the windows of a brand new structure, a building that didn't exist a month ago. Children giggled nearby. The soft sound of piano music floated through the air, played live by a teenager who sat beside his wheelchair, his fingers dancing with joy. Dozens of people gathered under a large white canopy set up in front of the building. Cameras clicked. News reporters held up microphones. Community leaders sat in folding chairs in front rows adorned with blue bows. And at the heart of it all stood Elena. She wore a soft gray tailored suit, something professional yet elegant. Her hair swept back neatly. Her name badge, which once read nurse, now bore a different title, director. The building behind her shimmered with promise. The Elena Reyes Pediatric Wellness Center. The silver plaque read, letters engraved beneath the center's emblem, a silhouette of a nurse kneeling beside a child in a wheelchair. Elena's hands were steady, but her heart was pounding. She glanced across the crowd and saw Ava in the front row, clapping quietly with a bright ribbon in her hair. And next to her, dressed in a dark navy suit, was Alexander Kane. His usual guarded demeanor softened today, pride gleaming in his eyes as he watched the woman who had saved his daughter become a beacon for others. The MC finished his speech and handed her the microphone. The crowd leaned in. Elena took a breath. 6 weeks ago, she began, her voice steady but full of emotion. I was just trying to get to work. Laughter rippled gently. I had no idea that my life was about to change, that I would wade through a flood, climb a rooftop, and meet a little girl who was far braver than I ever imagined. That day, I didn't think about heroism or sacrifice. I just saw someone who needed help. And I believe, deeply, that every child deserves to be seen, to be helped, and to be given the chance to heal. She paused, her eyes misting as she glanced again at Ava. This center isn't just a building. It's a promise. It's a safe space. It's a place where children with disabilities are not only treated, but celebrated. Where healthcare meets heart. Where no family is turned away, regardless of what they can afford. And it's possible because someone believed in me. Her gaze landed on Alexander, who offered a small nod in return. The crowd erupted in applause. A ribbon was cut. Balloons soared. Children ran inside, exploring colorful therapy rooms, sensory gardens, reading nooks, and music studios. Doctors and volunteers hugged one another. Elena stood near the entrance, shaking hands, accepting thank yous, but inside, her mind drifted, through flashbacks that played like a film only she could see. She remembered the rooftop, the rain pounding, the little girl crying, the feel of water climbing up her ankles, thighs, waist, as she hoisted Ava higher. She remembered whispering, "It's going to be okay," even though she wasn't sure it would be. She remembered the rescue helicopters, the soaking wet gurney, the adrenaline, the cold, and then, the day after, the day 3 limousines pulled up in front of her hospital, and a billionaire handed her a check for $800,000 and told her she had changed his life. She had stared at that check for days, unable to cash it, unsure what to do. But slowly, an idea took shape. She began to dream again. This time, not just for herself, but for the children she had met over the years. The ones whose appointments were canceled because their parents couldn't pay. The ones who never got physical therapy because the nearest center was 50 miles away. The ones whose smiles dimmed because society told them they didn't fit in. So she called Alexander. And instead of merely thanking her again, he said 4 words that still echoed in her chest. Let's build your vision. Within days, blueprints were drafted. Architects consulted. Medical experts flown in. Elena spent hours reviewing equipment catalogs, consulting with occupational therapists, designing wheelchair-accessible play areas, and creating sensory rooms for children with autism and other neurological conditions. Every inch of the building carried her fingerprints. Every decision carried her heart. Even her living situation had changed. The modest apartment above the pharmacy, still stained with the memory of muddy floodwater, was replaced by a warm, airy home on a hill not far from the center. It wasn't a mansion, but it was safe, bright, and purpose-built, with ramps, wide hallways, and a guest wing specifically designed for families with disabled children visiting from out of town. The home became more than a house. It became a sanctuary. Sometimes, on quiet mornings, Elena would sit in the sunroom and listen to Ava play the piano there, soft melodies filling the space with peace. Other times, she'd invite parents from the center over for tea, offering them not just advice, but comfort. She didn't buy a fancy car. She didn't take trips to exotic places. She poured every cent and every second into building something lasting. And the community noticed. News outlets featured her story. From nurse to hero to director, the headlines read. Interviews flooded in. Universities requested she speak. Her inbox overflowed. But Elena remained grounded. She still checked on patients. Still sat beside children afraid of needles. Still crouched to their eye level to say, I see you. I've got you. Fame never clouded her purpose. It sharpened it. Back at the ceremony, the sun began to dip low on the horizon. The crowd began to thin, but a few families lingered, exploring the gardens behind the building. Elena stepped outside for a moment of quiet and found herself standing beside Alexander again. You did it, he said softly. We did it, she replied. A moment passed, the kind of silence that didn't need filling. I lost my wife when Ava was 4, he said suddenly. I was too busy running companies to know what she needed. That day, when the flood came, I thought I'd failed her again. Elena turned to him. You didn't, she said gently. You gave her the best gift a father could, the ability to be loved and rescued by someone who cared when it mattered most. And now she's part of something bigger than any of us. He looked down at the engraved name on the center. She told me she wants to be a nurse like you, he said with a smile. Elena laughed. She'll be better than me. They stood in the golden light, not as billionaire and nurse, but as two people who had been transformed by the same child. That night, after the last guest left and the building stood quiet, Elena walked the halls of the pediatric center alone. Her heels clicked gently against polished floors. She passed by a mural of smiling children, the walls covered with artwork painted by patients. Her eyes rested on a quote etched above the main atrium, sometimes heroes don't fly. They walk beside you, and they never leave you behind. She touched the wall lightly. She could still hear the storm in her memory, still feel the weight of Ava in her arms, still remember the roar of the flood. But now it was joined by something else. Laughter, hope, possibility. This wasn't just a new chapter. It was a new beginning, and she was ready for all of it. The grand chandelier sparkled like a constellation suspended above velvet rows of anticipation. Inside the concert hall, the lights dimmed slowly, casting a warm golden glow over the seated audience. Whispers faded to silence, hearts settled, and breath hung in the air as if the world paused, waiting for music, for meaning, for magic. Months had passed since the flood, since Elena found herself wading through waters to reach a crying little girl on a wheelchair. Since her world had shifted from a nurse's schedule to a director's office. Since the day 3 black limousines rolled into a hospital parking lot and delivered not only a gift, but a new life. And tonight, as she sat in the front row of a sold-out charity concert, she could feel it all returning, not as a memory, but as a symphony. The stage curtains opened. There she was, Ava Kane, 10 years old, delicate, bold, radiant. She wheeled herself toward the polished grand piano, the hem of her white satin dress brushing the pedals she wouldn't need. Her hair was pulled into a gentle braid, her cheeks flushed with quiet excitement. The audience watched, spellbound, as she positioned herself in front of the ivory keys with a poise that defied her age. The silence was absolute. And then, she played. Soft at first, like raindrops on windows. A melody that whispered of things once lost and slowly found again. Then it built, like the rising of a storm, beautiful and unpredictable. Her hands moved swiftly, gracefully, as if she was pulling light from the keys. The piano sang of water and rooftops, of trembling hands reaching into flood waters, of rescue and rebirth. It was a song only Ava could play, because it was her story, and Elena's, and her father's, and somehow, everyone's. From her seat in the front row, Elena watched with eyes full of wonder. She had seen Ava cry in fear, cling to her in a storm, struggle to regain her strength in physical therapy, smile weakly through her recovery. She had seen her broken and brave. And now, she saw her brilliant. This moment, this concert, was a dream Ava had once spoken about in whispers, too afraid to say it out loud. Yet here she was, center stage, with the world listening. Alexander Kane sat beside Elena, impeccably dressed as always, but different now, less guarded, more present. There was a softness in his posture, in his eyes. No business call could pull him away tonight. No investment mattered more than the sound of his daughter's fingers moving like wind across the piano. Occasionally, he glanced at Elena, not out of formality, but out of something quieter, something like gratitude that no longer needed words. Ava's piece crescendoed. The notes danced and soared. The room held its breath. And then, with a final chord as soft as a lullaby, she ended. Silence. For a heartbeat. Then, the room exploded. A standing ovation. Applause that rolled like thunder, filled with tears and joy and awe. People clapped with their whole hearts. Some wept openly. Others cheered Ava's name. But the girl at the piano didn't bow. She didn't look to the crowd. She looked to Elena, and wheeled straight to her. Elena stood, caught off guard by the sudden movement, but Ava didn't hesitate. She rolled right to her, arms open, eyes shining. Elena bent down and they hugged, tightly, fiercely, as if the music hadn't ended, only changed form. I told you I'd do it, Ava whispered in her ear. I never doubted you, Elena whispered back, her voice trembling. Alexander stood beside them now, watching the embrace. After a moment, he reached out and placed a gentle hand on Elena's shoulder. His voice, when he spoke, was low but powerful. Family isn't always blood, he said. Elena looked at him, eyes glassy. She knew he meant it. And for the first time, she realized something she hadn't let herself accept fully until now. She belonged here. Not just at the concert, not just in Ava's journey, but in their lives. This wasn't an act of charity anymore. This was connection. This was chosen family. Photographers captured the moment, but none of their flashes could light it brighter than the emotion already glowing between the three of them. Behind them, the screen above the stage flickered to life, displaying photographs from the flood recovery efforts. Volunteers stacking sandbags. Nurses tending to the injured. Children smiling beside rebuilt homes. And in the center, a shot of Elena and Ava on the rooftop during the flood, taken by a rescue drone. Elena holding Ava close as the waters raged around them. A moment that had once been terrifying, now immortalized as the beginning of something beautiful. As the slideshow played, soft piano music continued in the background, this time, not played by Ava, but pre-recorded by the concert's youth ensemble. Elena and Alexander guided Ava backstage, weaving through curtains and hallways filled with crew members and musicians. They found a quiet corner with a view of the city through a high window. The lights of Pennsylvania stretched like a galaxy below them. Ava was still buzzing. Did you hear the claps? I think I saw a lady crying in the third row. Elena laughed. You made her cry, in the best way. Alexander knelt beside his daughter, smoothing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. I've never been more proud of anyone, he said. I had good teachers, Ava replied, glancing at them both. There was no fanfare in the way they lingered there, just warmth. Ava's fame would grow. They all knew that. Her talent, her courage, her story, it would echo far beyond this concert hall. But tonight was about more than music. It was about healing, giving back, and celebrating a journey that had turned tragedy into triumph. Later that evening, back at Elena's home, the three of them sat around her kitchen table. The concert had raised over $500,000 for flood victims still recovering. Donations poured in from around the country. Elena had already begun drafting plans for a mobile clinic that could reach underserved areas during emergencies. Ava was already dreaming up her next performance, something a little jazzy, she'd said, giggling. But for now, there were cookies and cocoa. Alexander leaned back in his chair, loosened his tie, and said something he rarely said. I'm happy. Elena smiled. You don't need to be a billionaire to say that, you know? He chuckled. No. But sometimes, it takes a flood and two incredible women to remind you. Ava yawned, stretching her arms, and Elena reached out to help her with her blanket. You're staying here tonight? Elena asked. Of course, Ava replied, already curling up on the couch. This is home. And it was. Not because of the walls or the roof, but because it was where love lived. As the night deepened and the stars took their place in the sky, a calm settled over them all. Elena stood by the window for a moment, looking out at the lights of the city. She thought about the journey, every twist, every turn, the storm, the rescue, the reward, the transformation. And now this, a night of music and full-circle grace. Her life had changed, yes, but more than that, it had expanded. It had made room for new dreams, new family, new purpose. And it was only the beginning. Behind her, soft piano music played from the speakers, Ava's song on loop. The camera in this imagined scene would pan back slowly, rising above the house, above the street, above the city. The final shot, the three of them sitting together in soft lamplight, laughing over cocoa and cookies, held together not by blood, but by courage, compassion, and fate. Then the screen fades to black. The last notes of the piano linger, and silence follows. Not empty, but whole. If you enjoyed this heartfelt story of courage, compassion, and fate, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories just like this one. Your support helps us continue sharing inspiring content with the world. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you feel about how the story unfolded and how it all ended? Did the moment when Elena stood beside Ava after her piano performance move you? What did you think about Alexander Kane's transformation from a distant billionaire father to a man who understood the value of chosen family? Rate the story on a scale of 1 to 10 in the comments below. Be honest. We want to hear your voice. Also, drop your location in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from. Whether you're in a quiet town, a busy city, or somewhere halfway across the globe, your perspective adds something special to this growing community. Your feedback truly matters. Let's talk about Elena's journey, Ava's triumph, and the full circle moment that brought them all together. We'll be reading every comment. Stay connected. More stories are coming.